A few years back, I took the Syntonics 101 program with a number of other optometrists from around the world. I've had my thoughts on Syntonics for well over 20 years since I first was introduced to the idea. Mostly been lurking in the background, but lately there's been a surge in popularity. It's been recommended quite a lot. It's become standard practice in a lot of rehabilitation situations. And so rather than just complaining about it, I thought I would take the time and develop finally a series of somewhat detailed videos, some thoughts, some ideas that I've had for these over these years about Syntonics, and give you the reasons why I have concerns about the practice, but more in particular charging for the practice. And with all respect to my colleagues, my well-meaning colleagues who do practice Syntonics, I think we all have a responsibility to do well by our clients, and if you find that in some instances it's helpful, I would encourage you to ask why it's helpful, what is going on that is helpful, and are you quantifying it? Are you charging all of your clients for it? And if you're charging all of your clients for it, can you justify it? And these are hard questions to ask. And I understand if you're frustrated with me asking these questions, but I do respect your desire to do well by your clients and to help them in most often difficult situations. If you're recommending Syntonics, there's got to be a reason for it. I think there's maybe a future for Syntonics, but we have to be cautious about how to approach next steps and why we do what we do and what we charge for it. So with that said, let me jump in, and I'm going to read from my PC here, and you'll forgive me if I'm doing that just to make sure I get the message right. So I've long been a proponent of visual assessment and remediation, including optics, surgery, and rehabilitation. If it helps, we should do it. Furthermore, as practitioners, we have a right to charge for our expertise, tools, and time, but keep clients' costs reasonable. I believe that that's one of our responsibilities. With this agreement with our clients, we need to ensure also that if we charge them, we have good reasons and rationale to do what we do. So in other words, in practice, our work ideally should be based in science, be reproducible, with similar diagnostic and treatment protocols shared by similar professionals anywhere on Earth, and expect similar results. For as long as I've been aware of the importance of vision remediation in child development and TBI, I've been opposed to overcharging on services, for charging for therapies that are not widely accepted as effective. And there are several. Patients are eager to find support. They're in turmoil and vulnerable, and often willing to make great sacrifices on the promise of a clinician specialist who calls themselves doctor. A friend and colleague asked, well, even if I don't know how it works, isn't it wrong to hold back therapy for someone who is suffering? Well, this bit of wordplay is a bit of a non sequitur, even though well-meaning. Of course, we all want to do what is best for our clients, but can we achieve similar results by other means, other existing means, like, for example, meditation or counseling, or just the soothing voice of a comforting professional, or a good refraction? Do we charge all of our clients the same in the hope that a procedure will help only some? What do we charge for such a hit-and-miss proposition? Are we doing harm to the profession by insisting on treatment that is not recognized anywhere as valid, and most often viewed as sham at best and quackery in the worst instance? In this case, we're talking about what is called Syntonics, sometimes optometric phototherapy. It's the application of specific light wavelengths to the eyes in order to address myriad concerns centered around the notion of sympathetic balance. Having been challenged on this, I felt only fair to review some specific foundations of Syntonics and why I feel we need to exercise extreme caution as a profession when we stray too far off the path into the realm of sham therapies. This is a long discussion about what is considered fringe, and still the practice has grown in popularity for a number of reasons, mostly because clinicians offer it, insist on it as part of the rehabilitation protocols. There are lessons to be drawn from looking at this practice in some detail, what it means for vision rehabilitation, and so it's worth taking the time to look at things again at some length. To be absolutely clear, there is a place for photobiology and photobiomodulation, and the application of color in healthcare and in industry. There are well-documented, well-supported practices that are founded in concluded science. These practices work, and patients are the beneficiaries whether they recognize it or not. There will be measurable benefits. These practices are not based in the Syntonic principles and have nothing to do with Syntonics. I've long had concerns about Syntonics, starting in my early days studying optometry when I'd seen a Syntonics table at a vision fair. I was amused at first, then alarmed at some of the things I was reading in the primary text in the domain. The practice was marginal at the time, fringe, but I monitored from a distance. Eventually, I took the Syntonics 101 program to satisfy my curiosity. More than anything, the experience further alarmed me. The content and rationale were in no way reflecting any sort of rational scientific approach. It had no backing in research. It was costly. There was also the matter of 2 ODs from Poland who needed more information on why their treatment failed and why they were served summons to appear in court over false claims in treating a case of strabismus. And they never did get their answer as to why. It didn't work. Likewise, I hear the concerns very plainly when speaking with OTs, occupational therapists, about their experiences with vision therapy, including Syntonics, and how parents spend thousands on lauded therapies that never yield noticeable benefits by any metric. For their sake, therapy should be effective, only as long as needed, and follow science-based guidelines, even if the therapy is novel, untested. Syntonics, with over 100 years of history, has had many chances to prove itself, and it has not, largely because it is a paradigm founded on deprecated scientific notions. In this series of discussions on Syntonics, I engaged DeepSeek and ChatGPT to review some objective questions about Syntonics. Anyone can ask these same questions and get similar responses and refine them as you like. The main points are as follows. Number 1, Syntonics is founded on outdated scientific notions. Number 2, Syntonics is not the same as photobiology, photobiomodulation, where we can find specific therapeutic uses of applied light. Number 3, Syntonics is lacking standards of any kind, and so presents a medical and professional risk. Photobiomodulation and light therapy have a legitimate place in clinic, but these are not Syntonics. Syntonics may have potential, perhaps, but to be taken seriously, it has to move past a century of scant support and show support for the varied claims practitioners continue to make. Furthermore, even if mechanisms are in doubt, the claims made themselves need to be refined to include specifics of what is happening, what benefits are occurring, how long these last. Let's get into that discussion that I had with the AIs on this topic of Syntonics. So the first question I ask is, I'm looking for the book on Syntonic phototherapy written by Sptiler. If you're looking for the book on Syntonic phototherapy written by Sptiler, the title you're looking for is The Syntonic Principle, Its Relation to Health and Ocular Problems, authored by Dr. Harry Riley Sptiler, DOS, MD, MS, PhD. The publication date was originally in 1941 by the College of Syntonic Optometry, and a paperback edition was later released in September 22 of 2011 by Wipf and Stock. About the content, the book lays the foundational principles of Syntonic phototherapy, using selected visible light frequencies through the eyes to influence systemic health and ocular function. It includes remarkable clinical statistics demonstrating the efficacy of Syntonic treatments in the visual and systemic conditions. Next question. What is your analysis of the Syntonic principles, its relation to health and ocular problems? Response. Here is a balanced, research-informed analysis of the book by Harry Riley Sptiler from 1941. So let's start with the historical and conceptual significance. The foundational work in Syntonic phototherapy. So Dr. Spitler's book is the cornerstone of Syntonic phototherapy, a branch of optometric treatment applying selected visible light frequencies through the eyes to balance the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic versus parasympathetic, and address systemic and visual dysfunctions. It showed impressive early results by 1940 standards. In his thesis, Sptiler reported that out of 3,067 individuals, 90.7% responded positively to Syntonic treatment, a striking figure that helped establish the method's credibility in its era and beyond. Largely, these were self-reports, subjective, mailed in. These statistics continue to be quoted today in Syntonics training. The theoretical appeal. The approach proposed that different colors, red, green, blue, variants thereof, could target specific branches of the autonomic nervous system, influencing everything from vision disorders to emotional and physiological imbalances. The approach, both technical and scientific in nature, appealed to many in its simplicity and the ability to self-apply a simple therapy with broad and lasting effects. Dr. Sptiler, who held degrees in optometry and medicine, developed his theories in the 1920s. In his book, The Syntonic Principle, he argues that light's therapeutic power enters the body primarily through the eyes, that application of certain wavelengths has potentially broad, profound, and long-lasting therapeutic benefits. The core concept, or the principle, is that Syntonics aims to restore balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems by applying specific frequencies, or colors, of light through the eyes, thereby improving visual function and general health. The diagnostic approach includes assessing of subjective patient reporting, medical history, body type, pupil responses, and dynamic visual fields. So intended applications, Sptiler and subsequent practitioners claim it effectively treats strabismus, amblyopia, accommodative convergence problems, visual field constrictions, head trauma, and learning-related visual issues, and certainly others depending on whom you're speaking with or reading. The claimed effects of Syntonic phototherapy varies depending on who you talk to and what you're reading, but across clinics, descriptions, and patient reports, Syntonic phototherapy is said to achieve a broad array of benefits, and these include, but are not limited to, visual improvements including enhanced visual acuity and contrast, better visual attention and expanded visual fields, treatment of lazy eye or amblyopia, strabismus, and convergence and focusing issues. Systemic or non-visual benefits include increased energy and improved sleep, digestion, and relaxation, reduced eye strain, light sensitivity, headaches, alleged reductions in cravings including sugar, caffeine, smoking, better appetite, diet, weight loss, and even improved reproductive functions. Other neuroregulatory goals or effects including rebalancing the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic versus parasympathetic tone, modulating brain centers like the hypothalamus and pineal gland through retinal light stimulation. Of course, there are important caveats to this. Most of these claimed outcomes come from clinic websites and promoters, not peer-reviewed studies, of which there are very few to none, depending on what you're talking about. Empirical support via robust clinical trials is minimal, and many listed benefits overlap with placebo or subjective symptom relief. Patient experience highlights include cost me $3,000, zero improvement of symptoms. One patient expressed regret over the investment in the treatment, noting both high cost and no benefit. Another patient reported $2,000, way better tracking, depth perception improved. Another user reporting noticeable improvements in vision, though again, they emphasized the financial investment. These accounts suggest highly variable outcomes and underscore the financial burden placed on patients. So in quick summary, the estimated cost for Syntonics is typically looks like between $2,000 and $3,000 for a full course based on anecdotal reports. Clinic rates most often are unlisted. There's an estimate of generally 3 sessions per week and 20 plus sessions overall. Reported benefits from clinicians and from clients include visual acuity, field, and amblyopia, improvements, neurologic, including focus and relaxation, systemic, including digestion, cravings, and energy. Evidence quality, largely clinically based claims, limited rigorous claims trials are available, and largely the material that you do see showing benefits are frequently marketing materials. Patient reports, these are mixed. Some report improvement, others cost alone without benefit. Okay, let's move past that and look at a contemporary scientific perspective on things. So let's look first at a systemic review that found very low evidence of efficacy. A recent systematic review of papers 1980 to 2022 assessed 8 clinical studies, excluding case reports. They were evaluating outcomes like visual acuity, contrast sensitivity, stereopsis, and reading ability. Across all outcomes, the certainty of evidence was very low, and the review concluded that there was no consistent evidence supporting the clinical effectiveness of Syntonic phototherapy. Limitations in study design. The review highlighted methodological shortcomings, absence of randomized controlled trials, lack of placebo controls, inconsistent protocols, and variable treatment durations, all of which undermine the reliability of claimed benefits. And this is one thing that Syntonics, the College of Syntonics Optometry, needs to take seriously if they're going to be taken seriously in research and clinical applications. Select recent studies do offer mixed signals. A quasi-experimental study in amblyopic children recently using red filter therapy reported significant improvements in stereopsis, especially among anisometropic amblyopes. Another 2025 randomized trial comparing Syntonic phototherapy with part-time occlusion in refractive amblyopia found that Syntonic therapy yields significantly better improvements in visual acuity and visual field outcomes. Although intriguing, these results come from isolated studies that still don't overcome the broader lack of validation via large-scale rigorous trials. So asking the same question from ChatGPT regarding the evidence gap, what a systematic review found. So once again, asking the same question, analyzing that paper, recent systematic review and its findings. Your concerns as a developmental optometrist are well supported by the most rigorous available evidence. A 2023 systematic review published in the Journal of Optometry evaluated all clinical studies on Syntonics from 1980 to 2022 and drew very clear conclusions. So using the grade assessment, a standardized system for rating evidence quality, the review found very low certainty of evidence for every outcome. The key finding, the authors concluded there is no scientific evidence to support its clinical use for treatment of any kind of visual anomalies. Methodological shortcomings in these papers. The review identified specific reasons for this lack of evidence across the 8 studies analyzed, 433 total subjects. Study design flaws. Most were pseudo-experimental, lacking proper controls or randomizations with a high risk of bias. Confounding variables. In one study, Syntonics was combined with intravenous vitamins and electrical currents, making it impossible to isolate its effect. Heterogeneous populations. Studies mixed children with learning difficulties, athletes, and patients with eye diseases, making results unreliable for specific conditions. Surprising negative finding. Notably, one study found that Syntonics actually diminished reading abilities. So in summary, looking at some of the strengths and limitations of the Syntonic principle, strengths include historical significance as the founding text of Syntonic phototherapy. The limitation of it, of course, is that there's a lack of high-quality scientific evidence supporting efficacy. On the strength side, early reported outcomes suggest potential, though methodologically weak and overstated data, no doubt. The systemic review found no consistent, reliable benefit of Syntonics. Some emerging small-scale studies do show promise for amblyopia, perhaps for myopia as well. Studies remain limited in scope and rigor. Those studies that are available are limited, and they don't tell us a lot. We have to wait now. But given the last 100 years of limited studies and outcomes, I'm not holding out too much hope. One of the ongoing benefits of Syntonics, if you like, is that there's continued clinical use and an ongoing patient interest underlined by a value of good experience. There is still widespread skepticism amongst mainstream optometry, vision science, medicine, and ophthalmology, psychiatry. With respect to clinical popularity and practitioner perspectives, current use within clinical practice. Some optometric clinics continue to offer Syntonics as part of vision therapy, and certainly some insist on it. Patients are typically fitted with colored filters through goggles for short sessions, 5 to 20 minutes, or the light is shone directly in their eyes, and the light is tailored to their condition. Anecdotal experiences, both supportive and skeptical, among patient communities, experience diverge significantly. Some hail Syntonics as life-changing for binocular vision disorders or convergence issues, claiming real, lasting improvements. Just as a side note, Syntonics is generally adjunct and not the sole therapy it is, so it's going to be often difficult to distinguish its effects versus other elements of therapy, unless it's the only therapy being offered, which I've never seen. Certainly others dismiss it as pseudoscience or a placebo, likening it to anti-vax propaganda and warning that it wastes time and money. A number of users report neutral or negative personal outcomes, and some even describing discomfort or distress during sessions. So, balancing your perspective, this is the AI speaking to me. This puts professionals in a difficult position. While proponents have reported positive clinical anecdotes for decades, the rigorous scientific support required for evidence-based practice remains absent. The practitioner's dilemma. You are balancing the weight of long-standing clinical tradition against a systematic review that shows the reported improvements are likely not due to therapy itself, but due to placebo effects, the non-specific effects of attention, or concurrent treatments. And the path forward, the review is not a call to ignore light's potential, but a demand for high-quality research, proper sham controls, randomizations, and masked outcome assessments to determine if any true effects exist. And this is my primary message. If there's something, then show it. Otherwise, we probably shouldn't be charging for it. And so let's continue this discussion with the two AI models. And my next question is as follows. Is it likely that two syntonists would generate the same diagnosis and treatment plan? Corollary, is there any evidence that a syntonic diagnosis is relevant to the treatment protocol implemented? And the response comes, and of course, you have to keep in mind that the AIs, they like to placate, they play to our emotions, our egos, and so that's reflected in this response, as in many of the responses that we get from AIs, I should say. And so, once again, Is there any evidence that a Syntonic diagnosis is relevant to the treatment protocol, and would two Syntonists generate the same diagnosis and treatment plan? That's a sharp and important line of questioning. You're really getting at the core weakness of Syntonic phototherapy as a clinical system, whether it is reproducible, consistent, and clinically justified. And so the diagnostic process in Syntonics is essentially as follows. So Sptiler's system and its current descendants traditionally involves case history, so symptoms, visual fatigue, headaches, attention issues, and so forth. Visual field testing. This is dynamic perimetry, typically looking for constrictions or scotomas. We're looking at pupil reflexes, and we look at somatotype or autonomic balance assumptions, less used today, presumably, but yeah, somatotyping. And then finally, overall clinical impression, which is very much, again, as with most of these elements here, is going to be very much subjective. So the practitioner then selects colored filters to use in therapy. For example, blue-green for sympathetic inhibition and red-orange for stimulation. Reproducibility between practitioners. No published evidence demonstrates that two trained Syntonists given the same patient would arrive at the same diagnosis or treatment plan. In fact, the lack of standardized protocols is a recognized criticism. The filters used, duration of exposure, and length of therapy vary widely between clinics. Unlike optometry's mainstream tools, refraction, acuity charts, retinal imaging, Syntonic assessments aren't standardized or objectively quantifiable and not likely admissible in court. This makes inter-practitioner agreement, inter-rater reliability very highly questionable. So with regarding diagnosis and treatment correlation, let's look at the diagnosis-treatment correlation. In evidence-based medicine, a diagnosis is only meaningful if it reliably guides treatment that improves outcomes. For Syntonics, the diagnosis, for example, sympathetic dominance inferred from field constriction or pupil signs, does not have proven physiological validity. There's no robust evidence that the chosen Syntonic protocol, which colors are prescribed, actually depends on or is enhanced by the diagnostic category assigned. In practice, treatment plans may be chosen by convention, simply saying symptom X leads to filter Y, rather than diagnostic necessity. So put bluntly, the Syntonic diagnosis is not empirically validated as relevant to treatment outcomes at all. So let's look at what the literature says. Going back to the systematic review of 2003 in the Journal of Optometry, they again found that 8 clinical studies that had any kind of evidence of efficacy but the efficacy was the conclusion was very low certainty, and the protocols varied with no proof that diagnosis type mattered in determining results. Modern practice guides from the College of Syntonic Optometry promote case-based learning and general filter guidelines, but provides no controlled studies showing that diagnosis improves or personalizes outcomes. Anecdotal reports. Patients report online. Anecdotal reports. Patients online often describe very different experiences between clinics, suggesting that diagnosis and treatment plans and protocols are inconsistent. So in summary, it is unlikely that two Syntonists would produce the same diagnosis and treatment plan, given the subjective and non-subjective nature of the assessment methods. There is no evidence that the Syntonic diagnostic process, fields, pupils, and somatotyping, is clinically relevant to the treatment protocol or outcomes in any way, shape, or form. At best, diagnosis may serve as a heuristic or ritual framework that gives the therapy structure. At best, diagnosis may serve as a heuristic or ritual framework that gives the therapy structure, not a scientifically validated or necessary step even. Just some final thoughts on this, and we'll put up some references that we used on this one. Syntonic phototherapy is a low regulation, out of the mainstream treatment with wide-ranging claims and limited published evidence. The costs, often rising into thousands, can be substantial, particularly given the uncertainty of outcomes. If you're considering Syntonics, you may want to explore more evidence-based alternatives that address visual or neurological issues such as standard vision therapy, optometric rehabilitation, or physiologically grounded light therapies like circadian aligned lighting, blue light regulation. I hope you found that helpful. It's a little long, but I think it's an important topic. We have a few more in this series. I hope you check them out. And for more reasons than just showing that we can do better in therapy, I think it's important to follow up on this. There's some good science here behind this discussion, and I think it's good for the profession overall. I think we can move this forward and to the benefit of everyone. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next one.